if we continue to frame the issue of gender-based violence in terms of men versus women, will we be further creating the tension between? And I think it is easy for us to condemn anybody. Condemning is very easy. What is difficult is actually transforming the behavior of certain groups of people in terms of other groups of people. So I tend to argue that it is less important to call out people by name, but to call out the behavior and demand that the behavior stops. 2 times as many people were arrested last year than were arrested back in 1990.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
You know, I think it's really important to just understand that the level of excessive force that was used against primarily unarmed protesters was unwarranted, it was excessive, and it was extremely violent for a state that is had full control of its, I guess, its different arms.
But actually, I would like to say thank you for having Houghton on the show. It's really good that we get to, we get someone like him on the show to just talk about some of the serious issues confronting the society. On the gender violence, I know Houghton, likes to take the more scientific and academic side of it, where he says jails don't solve the problem, but from a personal view as, a member of society, I think the minimum for anyone who commits violence violence against women should be a jail sentence. That's the minimum. Whether it makes a difference, it doesn't make a difference, that punishment of jail has to be there. I would like to see, humanitarian organizations in Kenya be more, be seen more, like now we've got, a lot of issues of human rights abuses, human rights violations, but we don't seem to see, those organizations, in public and taking a stance, calling for action, calling for opposition and government to do something. We don't see that. It's like they just, sort of aligning or behaving in a certain way that's compatible with government expectations. And clearly government expectations is they don't want to see anyone talk about human rights in Kenya. So I am just really disappointed with, for example, Kenya human rights. They've just gone under. Nobody knows them. They don't exist, So I'm really, really disappointed with those organizations. They are not coming out, condemning, advocating, highlighting issues. And these are issues. So I'm just not happy with the level of publicity that's not being given to these issues by those organizations, and I should be doing so. Another issue I'd like to talk about is filing cases. I know sounds really good. I know Houghton said that, now Kenya is independent, Amnesty has got a board in Kenya and all that. That's all good. But I would like to, also, normally, for example, if you're in America, you'll understand that some cases, for example, if you want to challenge the Trump administration for its deportation of, what they call illegal aliens, if you go to some states, most likely you might be successful to challenge, but if you go to some states, you might be unsuccessful. So for legal tactics, I think the idea to make sure the option of filing cases outside Kenya remains, so that we can have, I would like to see a situation whereby, I think a few weeks ago we had the Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte. He's been, he was extradited to the ICC. We would like to make sure that, the option to file cases outside Kenya remains, because we cannot rule out a situation whereby you have the entire board being complicit and corrupt and nothing happens in Kenya, or cases take too long, witnesses die, evidence is destroyed. We don't want such a situation. So I would like to make sure, yes, it's good to have a Kenyan, independence and have different chapters in different counties, but the option of filing cases outside Kenya has to remain. And I would just like to find out, for example, why can't we, not just Houghton's organization, but also Kenya Human Rights, why they are not filing cases outside Kenya? They can go to the UK or America. There should be a legal mechanism that allows for human rights abuses to be filed outside Kenya. And sometimes you'll find that if cases are filed outside Kenya, it might even actually put political pressure on politicians to resolve those cases in Kenya rather than have them go outside. So I just like them to be a little bit more tactical legally. Also, another issue I would like to talk about is tracking deaths. So my question to Hal, if I want to know the number of people who have died from post-elections violence and protests up to now, is there a way I can see that number? And if I go to court and I want to start a case, do they have records that can be used? So I would like to really, whether that mechanism exists, or if it doesn't exist, it's not just Houghton's organization, but other organizations. They have to have, a way that, people can track, the number of people who have died.
Okay.
Also,
Hey, Peter.
Issue,
Peter, Peter, before, because there's quite a number of questions that have come in. Let him address those ones you've asked, and then we'll give you another minute to ask, like any other ones you have before, we let you go, because you're from Australia. We're giving you extra time. And you're the first one to call too. So again, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press star 5 to speak. This is Peter, the early bird catching the worm. So those who are going to be calling the last 20 minutes and then you get 30 seconds, na unatukasirikia. That's what you get when you don't call early. But anyway, let's go back to Irungu in studio to address, to address Peter's question, who's calling all the way from Australia. It's noon on Saturday, and he's sitting tuned in to us.
And probably amekelea kanyoma choma.
Yes, and probably is watching kangaroos just cross.
Kangaroos that's over there.
Yeah, just cross.
And wallabies and all that.
Yeah,
that one.
All right. Okay, Rongo, talk to us.
Yeah, no, I'm reminded actually that there are a lot of Kenyans in Australia, and just thank you, Peter. Please spread the word. This is a great show, and the time zones are in your favor.
Okay, yes, absolutely.
There are some Kenyans who are on this call who are basically, I think they may have slept by now.
Because they're the one from Juja.
Even if they started with us.
Who was that? Juja. The lady from Juja.
Yeah, from Juja.
She's from Juja.
Doris joined us earlier.
Yeah.
So quickly, I guess three things. One is, it is difficult running human rights organizations in Kenya today, right? There is a fallacy, there is a false mythhood that human rights organizations are extremely well funded. Over the last 10 years, I've probably seen about 40% drop in funding from, overseas development assistance, whether it be foundations, whether it be foreign governments, whether it be the UN or multilateral institutions. So 40% drop in the last 10 years. The scale of the challenges that we have cannot be met through the available resources that are there. Let me just put that there. This was even before the closing of USAID, right? Now we are in a different game altogether. And so I think for those of you who have expectations of human rights organizations, I would ask you to couple that expectation with making donations. And I think the one thing that we haven't tried yet is a model of using some of your remittances, so using some of your donations to actually do some work on structural problems, right? So all of us have given money at some point or the other to help somebody go through a medical procedure or to save somebody's life, right?
Yes.
But very few of us have ever given a shilling, a dollar. I was trying to think what it is in Australia, a British Australian pound. No.
Is it a dollar? I think it's dollar.
Peter, what is it, Bwana? What's your currency, Omera?
What's your currency, Peter? Ama, you'd use shillings there?
Australian dollar.
Australian dollar.
Okay. Thank you very much. As you probably have realized, I've not managed to get there yet. So I think people do need to provide resources. Very few people, I mean, I'm sure if we did a straw poll here, how many of you have given to a human rights organization, forget an international, one with an international reputation like Amnesty, but Usikimye, the organization that does safe houses across Kenya.
Drop a comment if you've donated to any human rights organization.
And not just once, but regularly.
Yes.
Right? Because if you think about keeping the doors open, keeping those spaces safe, both for men and women who have been violated, it needs consistent resources. Plus children, right? So that's the first thing I think it's really important. It's not an excuse, it's just a reality check that actually the resources are much fewer than the problems that we're up against. The second thing that was raised was an issue around if we continue to frame the issue of gender-based violence in terms of men versus women, will we be further creating the tension between? And I think it is easy for us to condemn anybody. Condemning is very easy. What is difficult is actually transforming the behavior of certain groups of people in terms of other groups of people. So I tend to argue that it is less important to call out people by name, but to call out the behavior and demand that the behavior stops. So somebody who in one context has abused people, with the right correction, and I agree with Peter that actually the minimum that should be there for people who violate others should be a jail sentence. But I think it's important to recognize that you don't jail people to send them away from society. You jail them to correct them, right? So it's in the prisons that they should get the kind of support and psychosocial support to make sure that they can come back to the society, they can be part of the society, and they can be, good citizens. There is an important, I think, issue that has been raised around the use of international law and the use of international justice mechanisms. So Amnesty does this regularly. For example, we have taken positions on things happening in specific countries, and we've taken it to the ICC, or we've taken it to a regional, like the African Court of Justice or the East African Court of Justice. But the thing that's tricky there is that there are two things that are really challenging. One is that you have to prove to those courts that you have gone through the legal system domestically and that you have not received justice, or that you are not able to prosecute that case domestically.
Wow. So that's like a minimum threshold.
Minimum threshold.
Very, very, right? very profound information.
And then let me share one case where we've done something a bit in the opposite direction. In 2017, scores of police officers rampaged through Nyalenda and other Kisumu settlements in between those 4 months of the elections, the two elections, right? And baby Pendo was on her mother's back, Lancer Cheng's back. And as she came out of the house, her father shouted, "We are coming out, we are unarmed, we have children." As they came out, the police formed a line of officers, and they beat them as they were trying to escape from the tear gas and from the houses. And on the back of Lancer was baby Pendo. Baby Pendo was not the only one that was hurt that day or killed that day. She died. There were 60 other victims of post-election violence. We, as Amnesty International, have been supporting a case that is a criminal case. So it's been filed by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations to find justice for baby Pendo and the 60 victims. Why is this really important? Because for the first time in the history of Kenya, the Director of Public Prosecutions has actually filed a case using the International Crimes Act. So he has filed alleging that the crimes against humanity have taken place. Not 5 counts, not 3 counts, but 47 counts of crimes against humanity. There are 12 police commanders who are being charged for command responsibility, not the people who necessarily swung the batons, not the people who threw the tear gas, but the people who told them to do this.
To do so.
That case is ongoing at the moment. There are several witnesses, and herein lies the second challenge that I was referring to. When you take a case out of the country, you have to carry with you all the witnesses that need to testify. So you need to find safe houses for them, and a case may take up to a year. And as we know from other cases, what happens is witnesses tend to be intimidated, they tend to be disappeared, they're bribed, and most cases fail as a result of that problem. So it is the case that you can go to an international court, But I think the domestic structures, we must continue to demand that the domestic justice, or rather justice, can be found at home. It can be found swiftly, and it can be found fairly. And I think that's the amnesty model at the moment. So we're taking a lot of cases to the domestic courts, even if it takes 5. The average time it takes for a case against a police officer is between 4 and 6 years.
Wow.
I joined Amnesty in 2018. Evans Jiroge was the student leader of Meru University. He was killed by a police officer. I swore that I would not resign from Amnesty until that case came to a conviction. It is now 2025.
Yeah.
That case is still hearing testimonies from witnesses.
In the Kenyan court system,
so,
or international?
So the speedy justice,
local.
the speedy justice is not working as efficiently as it's supposed to.
No.
Yeah. So Peter, real quick, we'll give you 1 more minute, and then we continue. I hope your questions have been answered.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Houghton, for touching on those issues. Just quickly, I'll go back to my. to continue on what I was talking about.
Yeah. 1 minute, Peter. 1 minute.
Up to date. List where someone can see all the people who have died from post-elections violence. And another one, I would like to know, Houghton, not just you and other organizations that do the similar work that you do, what is your legislative agenda? What do you want legislation? For example, you talked about, cases taking too long. Perhaps you could lobby politicians and, opposition and those in government to make sure those cases are, handled within certain timeframes. And also, I'd like to know is there an International Abductions Act? And if there is such an act, can you lobby that Kenya joins that act? And also, another issue I'd like to talk about. I saw you were in a debate with Ichungwa, and I would have wanted you to be more factual. You lost the debate, and I'm not happy that you lost the debate. You should have won that debate. You should have had the facts, and in the end, you should have said, "Look, this is what's happened, and we still have no convictions, taking too long, blah 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 blah." So I think you let me down. I have a lot of faith in you, and I look forward to contributing to your organization. I'm going to start, I have to support your organization. Keep doing the good work. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey,
all right.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, from Australia.
That Peter, he owes us nyama choma.
Yeah, he has
From
details.
Australia, kangaroo.
Yeah, he has details. Yeah, so maybe Irungu, you can start with a lot of people are asking, donate, where are we donating to? And like some people here have mentioned they've donated to Red Cross, they've donated to this and that organization. I see Tabitha saying donated to Sikimie, but people want to know, like with the efforts that you have, what are the places you recommend? And then of course, you can go back to answer Peter's question, maybe starting with the Kimani Ichungwa interview. But I'll let you take the sequence. Irungu.
Thank you very much. Let me start first of all with how can you get involved, right? I think there are maybe 4 or 5 different ways that people can get involved, particularly those who are in the diaspora. The first is, to remain, updated and informed about what's happening in the country, to participate in debates that happen online, to listen to shows like this and contribute. I think public awareness is just so important, right? Talking to your family members and so on, and creating a sense of respect for human rights is probably how we will uplift the country. Very directly. The second area is identify an organization that really, you are proud of, that you would like to see continue doing that work. You want to see them scale up that work. If you are concerned about issues of safe houses, Usikimwe is the best place to go. I'm very happy at some point to connect people. If you like the work around postmortems and pathology work, forensic evidence, the Independent Medical Unit is a great organization. They do that work. If you are impressed with, one of the I guess, one of the most, iconic leaders that has come out of the sector recently, and that's Faith Odhiambo, the president of the Law Society of Kenya.
Society of Kenya.
You know, you can make contributions to the Law Society of Kenya. They are doing great strategic litigation work. If you're interested in supporting human rights defenders like myself and others, there's an organization called Defenders Coalition. They put people in safe houses, they cover their back, they check their phones to make sure that they're safe, and they again, are available and looking for support. On the women's rights issues, CREW is a great organization. I could go on the whole night. Okay. There are organizations. For Amnesty International, please go to the website www.amnestykenya.org. You will see two little buttons at the top. One is to join, become a member. There's a membership subscription fee, and then you can also donate. And one of the commitments that we have been asked to make, or rather have been asked to develop, is a structure around is ensuring that for those donations that come from the diaspora, that we have a clear communication system back to them on the work that we're doing, so that people who invest that $1, that $2, whatever it is that you give, it essentially, you can see the value of that shilling, the value of that dollar. We're about to set up something called the Public Defenders Fund. This is a fund that is not paying for Irungu salary or any of our staff salaries. What it will do essentially is to provide services to people who are hurt. Just to give you an example, all of the people who were abducted that came out had to go through psychosocial counseling. On average, you need at least 3 sessions. In some cases, there are some people who are abducted who have gone into 10, 15 sessions, right? And it's important for us to keep them whole, to keep them, courageous, and to really give them a sense that they were loved and they were protected in their moment of need. So you can't imagine how cheap it is to actually take somebody through 3 psychosocial sessions. It's just $60, right? So if you
$60,
$60,
okay,
for 3 sessions.
For 3 sessions.
Yeah. Oh wow, okay.
And then there are other things like the third thing I'd probably say is that there are many young people who were really victimized during the Gen Zs. If they weren't abducted, if they weren't killed, some of them lost their school fees, their school bursaries, let me put it that way, not their fees. There are a couple I know who had got scholarships to go and study in Israel to do agriculture. There's another one that was on the verge of going to Germany.
How did they lose them?
They became notorious. They were captured in the press, and then those governments decided that these are not the people that they should be giving bursaries to. They withdrew their bursaries.
Wow. Okay, that is something that's not even been on the news. We're hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, no, I know this because we debriefed with a lot of the Gen Z that were violated, and to be honest, their lives are not necessarily stronger as a result of what they went through.
What happened to that guy who said, "Mr. Speaker, sir"? Because it's been a mystery. We don't know his name. And he was the face. Yeah, at the peak, he was the face. But this guy just totally disappeared from the face of the planet. Who is he? What happened to him?
So we have no information about what happened to him. I was trying to remember his name. He had that moment. I mean, the occupation of the parliament on June the 25th didn't take hours. It was roughly about just under 10 minutes. It was 9.5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So it was a very short moment, but that was probably the most dramatic one.
Yes.
And we don't have any information about where he is. I still, feel a degree of pain, particularly for the family of Denzel Mondi, who we do know what happened to him. He was in Parliament that day. He went back to Jackie Ukwat and basically was found in a quarry 4 days later, floating. And it was alleged that he had essentially left the university and gone 60 clicks away, and threw himself over the whatever. His case is still an open case for us. So there are many people whose cases, I think out of the 89 abductions that we saw over the last year, 25 people are still missing. So 25 people are still not there.
Okay.
So I think on the issue of contribution, there are things you can do. And, I do hope that this conversation is not getting too heavy for people, because I think for me, who really has walked through this journey very intensely with my staff and with others, we have only but optimism and vigilance and a sense of commitment and patriotism that actually these things can be brought to an end. but they can only be brought to an end if more people begin to weigh in, begin to get engaged, begin to support the organizations that I talked about. Let me turn to Peter's question. So, first of all, Peter, let me invite you now on live radio, social media, TV, and all the platforms to become a member of Amnesty International. Your question suggests that you would be a great member. Your disappointment in me in the talk with on Head to Head is regrettable, but I accept it. There's always a time. One thing I learned is that you can always get up and do things differently. The structure of the debate was not actually designed for me. It was designed mostly for Kimani Ichung'wah.
Yeah, and with his red bottom shoes. And I like the lady who pointed that out.
Gen Z.
Yes.
My God. We didn't see it.
Paying attention to details.
Details.
Yes.
And I think even the majority leader was surprised that had been picked up.
Oh, you could see the look on his face.
So I think. So it was set up in a particular way. I did share the one statistic, which I will share again now, which I think is really important. There is still people who think what happened last year was not significant historically, right? So beyond the presence of thousands of people in the streets, most people don't know that the number of people who were killed last year is 3 times the number that were killed in the Saba Saba rallies of 1990.
Wow.
3 times.
And Saba Saba was the big one in Kenya's history after independence.
Restored multi-party democracy. It restored, the idea that freedoms of association and expression would be a reality for most Kenyans, and it began the process towards the constitution. 2 times as many people were arrested last year than were arrested back in 1990.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
I think it's really important to just understand that the level of excessive force that was used against primarily unarmed protesters was unwarranted, it was excessive, and it was extremely violent for a state that had full control of its different arms. The other thing I think that is important to recognize a little bit is on the issue of I think, Peter, you asked a question about where can Kenyans go to read data and information about post-election violence over the years. There is I don't think there's a single place that you can get all the numbers and the names of the people who have died in post-election violence since 1963. But I would direct you to missingvoices.co.ke. missingvoices.co.ke. This is a website that has been set up by about 20 organizations, including Amnesty and others, to essentially document extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. And every year they do an analysis. I'll turn to your third question, which is there a international act on enforced disappearance? There is. It's called the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances. It's part of the UN declarations. It is a good piece of international human rights standards. We have continuously, as a sector, called for this to be essentially ratified and domesticated. It has been signed, but not ratified or domesticated in Kenyan law. Therefore, one of the problems of working on abductions is, and it's a very strange legal problem, is that if you don't have a body, you essentially have to file a missing persons application. And in cases where it is suspected that the state has state or non-state actors have essentially killed somebody, you have to file an habeas corpus application.
Wow.
And that puts pressure on the states. Now, unfortunately, last year we saw more habeas corpus applications than probably we have seen since 1990.
Wow. So this period. So this is quite a big, I think, because we're living in the moment, most people are not realizing how big this moment is historically. I think once everything is said and done and it's being analyzed with the benefit of time, people will realize how historical, and it's my hope that something comes out of like all the blood that was shed last year, all the people that were tortured, all the people that were abducted, all the people that were jailed unjustly. I hope something comes out of it. Now, like I told you, time here moves very fast. It moves twice as fast as regular time outside there. I know we have a caller, but before we get to the caller, so caller, just stay tuned. What's the last 4 numbers?
1974.
So 1974.
Very relaxed.
Stay tuned. We're gonna get to you, and the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak.
Yes.
There's a question that actually there's a comment first of all that came from Afro-Jamaican, which I find very interesting, which is why I like the different perspectives of people who listen to this show. He's talking about Kenya may need to have an elected federal prosecutor, because these are things that we see in Western countries like the US, and I'm not sure about Canada. Maybe Afro-Jamaican, you can tell us that. I want you to address that a bit later. And then he says, and an elected Chief Justice. We saw recently in Wisconsin, they were electing one of the justices in their Supreme Court, and I think that happens in a lot of elections here in the US. I know a lot of people here who vote in the US. Your party judges, they float, because judges, it doesn't say Republican or Democrat in most cases, because they're not required to declare. So people just see, and I think that's one thing that even in America, people need to be educated, because I think part of the logic is to have direct accountability with the people, because what we have with these appointive justices, there's no direct accountability with the people. So maybe just talk about that briefly, and I want to come to Esther Mulusa's comment, which is tying into another question that we have, and then we're going to get to the caller. So maybe address Afro-Jamaican for like maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
So thank you for that. I mean, I think as Kenyans and as Africans and people of the global south, I think we have to look for models that work, right? So if we are not seeing appointed appointments within independent offices working, should we turn to the electoral route? And I think the argument that people who are accountable by virtue of the fact that they're voted in is one argument. I think in the Kenyan context, we would be careful with this, because many of the people we vote in are essentially thieves, wash agents, and really people who entertainers. People who tell jokes and dance well and so on. And I don't mean to abuse the entire National Assembly and the entire Senate, but I think it is important to recognize that and actually let me come to this. Feroz Novoroji, who passed away a week ago, and tomorrow he's being cremated, and there will be a service in Arlington, Virginia, and those of you who are interested, maybe I'll post on my Twitter handle more details on this. Feroz Novoroji, I met him when I was about 25. I was this young guy, and I kind of looked at the world, and I realized...
When you were still a DJ?
When I was still actually I had just finished a DJ, but I had cornrow.
Okay. Okay.
I was looking much more interested.
You mean Matuta? You mean Matuta?
He had Matuta.
Yeah, Matuta. Yes.
Okay, you have gone far, but anyway. So he looked. I was arguing that the world is run by politicians. Power is in politics, and therefore, I was looking at my career as essentially going in the political route. And he interrupted me and he said, politics is not a profession. If you want a career that makes a difference, find a profession that create a profession in which you have skills in, and bring politics to that.
Oh, wow.
So be an architect and build buildings that don't kill people, and you could go on this. Be a lawyer and protect people in court. Be a doctor that protects people who are hurt, etc. And I come back to this conversation because I think too many politicians go the political route. Too many people go the politician route, not realizing that actually the job of politicians is legislation.
Yes.
Right? You don't know how to read a law. You have no basis running for an elective office.
Yes.
So coming back to this issue, I think what we have to argue...
Oscar Sudi!
My thoughts exactly.
He's an engineer.
Yeah.
Engineer.
Okay, let's not get distracted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So coming back to this idea of an elected federal prosecutor, I think what we'd have to ensure and safeguard is that you don't have entertainers, wash and criminals essentially being elected into a post that is as important as a prosecutor. So I think that's the safeguards. It may work in this context. In the Kenyan context, I'm not sure.
It's not going to work.
We let somebody from outside, like we used to do the chief justices from back in the day, where we had folks from Kina Guyana, Kina Koka, all of those people who supposedly were supposed to be neutral. Supposedly, but
I would argue against that, because I think what we're doing essentially is giving up our sovereignty as a nation. In fact, there's a degree of pride that we have that all our institutions that matter must be Kenyan. The best chief justice we ever had, in my view, was Willy Mutunga.
Wow.
Man from Kitui.
Okay, all right. Yeah, because an interesting thing about the Kenyan constitution that even surprised Mubelo when we talked about, we told him, like as a Tanzanian, if you qualify, you can come and apply and try to apply to become a Kenyan justice and even serve in the independent commissions, IEBC. That's an interesting one. Like maybe we might, because of the issues we've been experiencing, maybe we should test that idea of having a foreigner as a chair of IEBC. Maybe, I'm just saying maybe, because
Afro-Jamaican has a lot of things to say.
Yes, Afro-Jamaican, if you can apply for that position, if you have the qualifications, it's still open. So before we get lost here, and I know there were so many questions coming in. Now we have the second caller. I really don't want us to lose Esther Mulusa's question, because this question is tying into one of the original questions that we wanted to ask you about, like human rights defenders in Kenya being perceived as foreign agents for the US and European countries. Now, Esther Mulusa is actually asking, he's saying, hello everyone, just join the conversation. I am all for human rights, but I still true. I think she meant I still kind of find it true about the foreign noise. Most NGOs, you said, are examples. You said ASCAN example practice soft power, which included funding and aligning themselves with opposition if the government of the day did not meet their selfish needs. However, human rights organizations have helped legal systems. For example, the police cannot keep someone in remand for more than 24 hours without charges. That is practiced to the letter in all police stations. So don't get me wrong. Lastly, while the NGO zeal is so low during the Uhuru and Kibaki regimes, so NGOs pick and choose regimes to push back at. Just asking. So this perception is very real. And many people will say, because we know some of the human rights defenders who are very popular, Boniface Mwangi, like that's something always you'll find, especially these government paid bloggers, they like repeating that. And this did not start with Boniface Mwangi. This
you mean the Mayai guy?
Yes, the Mayai guy, Dennis Itumbi. And these people, by the way, like Dennis Itumbi, these are people we need to be calling out by names. These are the modern day collaborators.
Yes.
These are the modern day home guards that I think we need to call out, and history needs to take them down. There's this other guy, I think it's called Gordon Opio. All these government bloggers, I think at some point... Yes, these government bloggers, I think they need to be... It's very important we call them out, and I know this might get me in trouble, but these are the modern day collaborators and the modern day home guards that they need to go down in history. Their children and their grandchildren need to remember them for this. But getting back to the conversation that we were having, the idea of foreign agents. Talk to us about that. Why is this perception there? And especially, I want to say from the start of the Uhuru regime, after those ICC cases, it took another level where now even members of parliament were using it, and so many other people were doing it, and now you have regular people. And actually, this did not start with Kinaboni. It went back to days of Wangari Maathai. Before she got a Nobel Prize and she became a hero. Back in the 90s, like that's the way she was being branded, because
the Green Belt movement.
Yes, she was being stripped down by President Moi, like in public events at Uhuru Park. So talk to us about that, Irungu, before we start getting emotional. Yeah. So
the allegation that human rights organizations is that they are foreign agents, or that they are puppets of foreign masters or foreign imperialism. It's not factual in the sense that, first of all, it's stereotypical in the sense that you're talking about maybe 50, 60 years of human rights organizing on the continent. So there, where it is factual, let me start with the things that are there, is that the funding that has been made available for human rights organization has largely come from overseas, right? So it's come through the USAIDs and the ODAs and the various other governments and United Nations and the foundations that are available. That is true. So the funding is there. I have run I've run organizations since '93. So these are a few years. I have never taken USAID funding. Why have I never taken it? It has been offered, and I have actually refused USAID funding for the simple reason that the funding was cumbersome. It was difficult for accounting purposes, and it was very much scripted around some clear objectives. But most donors do not tell us what to fund, right? What to request for.
Okay.
So you start with a proposal. The proposal is written by the organization. It is sent to the donor. The donor then says, "Is this in my priorities? I'm doing gender-based violence. No, I'm not doing extrajudicial killings." So that's where the negotiation happens. But I think the argument that somehow human rights organizations are directed by an ambassador or by a foreign country, I don't have any evidence of that from the 30 years.
Like Meg Whitman would call Irungu, go talk about this.
In fact, if anything, it was me calling Meg Whitman and saying, "Can you speak out and talk about the Gen Zs who are being brutalized in the streets of Nairobi?" So there is another side to this, which is that part of our responsibility as human rights organizations is to do power mapping and to see who it is we need to speak to. So I would speak to I would speak to the US ambassador, I would speak to the Inspector General of the National Police Service, I would speak to the Director of Public Prosecutions, I would speak to the PS of Interior. My job is to get governments to basically either stop doing human rights abuses or protect people. That's my job. That's
what about the church? Is the church involved in that as well?
I have spoken, yes, to the Anglican Archbishop. We have an open relationship in terms of lobbying and work. And on issues of corruption, he has been extremely clear that his pulpits will not be used for money laundering or for these performative rituals that happen on Sundays. So the religious organizations have been very important. But I do want to say that, as people, challenge the idea that human rights organizations should not be funded from abroad, the question I would still come back to is, what are you contributing? Like, what is your contribution to keep Amnesty's work funded by Kenyans? I've often said, as I've traveled abroad, that, my work as an Amnesty director is not complete until my organization is funded by Kenyans.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Human rights funded by Kenyans. Let me just share one fact on Amnesty. Amnesty does not receive funding from governments as a principle.
Okay.
So not only have I never received funding over the many years from USAID, but Amnesty USA has never received money from USAID. I think as far back as probably 1972, right? And that I think there was a USAID then, but there may have been something else then. So we don't do this generally. And why don't we do this? We don't do this because we don't want to be dictated and to be channeled into programs or human rights issues that are more important for the host government, for the donor, than what we think is important in the country. But then the question still remains, who funds us?
Yes, and that's a key question that a lot of people default to. You're funded by Western powers.
Some foreign chaps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some guys who are outside Kenya who are telling you how to, play this.
Because now some people
then
seeing you here saying
benchmarking here DC ati umekuja hapa studio
amekuja collect pesa na kupata instructions.
And where is it that Rao normally goes at sijui uko Brito?
Chatham House.
Chatham House.
So he does anapiga hizo maraundi alafu anarudi na do.
Yeah, so that's a talk, and unfortunately, this is the talk that becomes very sticky. That even people do not even bother to check whether it's true. People just believe it because it's been said and said so many times.
Said enough
times. And to add to that, I think what also happens is, and I think we've mentioned them, these bloggers, Itumbi and them.
Yeah, the government bloggers.
Yeah, those guys are, they've been paid to really, really hammer and trash. And because people don't understand, people don't know, people are not educated. I'm not saying that they don't, the organizations don't do a good job of advertising and marketing and doing whatever. But again, they need funds.